Live from the Neighbourhood Network Newsroom, I'm Deborah Chiluti, and welcome to today's edition of the Daily Dose, where we unpack the challenges, innovations, and human stories shaping our region and beyond. Get comfortable for the next 25 minutes as we fill you in. While you're at it, you can join in on conversations using the hashtag #TheDailyDose and follow us on X at the Neighbourhood Network. Kenya's higher education sector is in crisis. Universities face reduced funding, mounting debts, and delayed staff payments, all while students struggle under rising fees. Our correspondent, Joanne Gumbi, goes further in on the financial pressures threatening the future of our higher learning institutions. Joanne, from your reporting, what would you say are the biggest contributors to the financial challenges universities are currently facing?
I would say the universities are really struggling to stay afloat. Some of the challenges that they are going through is delayed salaries, overcrowded lecture halls, delayed constructions, and the impact of funding in universities is clearly visible.
And how are these challenges affecting the day-to-day experience of students and the staff?
I can say that the students are going through the biggest challenge because the learning calendar is being disrupted. So they're not able to attend classes despite their fees being paid. And on the staff side, their morale is very, very low because as their workload continues to increase, their salaries are still being delayed. So they have no motivation whatsoever to work. I spoke to University Communications Officer Naomi Cheloti, who described the severe strain of this system is due to delayed government disbursements.
In the Corporate Communications Office, the main thing that we stand by is pure transparency, but also at the same time we have to protect our stakeholders, so we have to be able to give information that will not be damaging to the university, but still quell the questions that the publics have. So based on this, we have to get, it's a tightrope, so we have to get a balance whereby there's still enough information to sustain the queries from our external publics, but still protecting the reputation of the university.
What strategies do university PR departments use to maintain trust with key stakeholders such as students, faculty, parents, donors, and government bodies during a crisis?
During a crisis, the communications office can either issue press releases or have forums within the university to just speak to the faculty and everybody else to give them a clear picture of the situation. And then after that, you can also speak to the media directly. You can do social media posts or just an address to just give a clear picture on the situation.
In situations where media coverage escalates or becomes negative, what steps does a communications team take to correct misinformation and to maintain a consistent institutional narrative?
In order to contain misinformation, first of all, the
I'm
institution
okay.
needs to ensure
Say
that
the last
it has a
statement
good
so that for
media
continuity
relationship with different media houses.
So,
and then one
it only
has
used to 54 to
verify the facts that are going out and create a clear picture in order to ensure that whatever is going out is what is actually happening in the institution.
It really has affected my education. Sometimes I tend to miss classes because the funds are not enough. And also it has pushed my graduation further because I take less units in a semester, so that means I'll have to wait another semester to graduate.
Thank you so much, Joanne. We are now joined in studio by Education Policy Analyst, Dr. Selfa Chiluti. Dr. From a policy and data perspective, what are the root causes of the current funding crisis in Kenyan universities?
Thank you for that question. What the public sees as a crisis in Kenyan university funding is actually not a crisis per se. It could just be something I may call policy overlaps and an increase in the population of students who require funds for higher education. When you look at policy from before independence and up to after independence, what the Kenya government has always done, and even the pre-colonial government, was to ensure that as many people as need education get education. And so they made efforts to make education more accessible and more cheap, so that more people could afford to get education. However, as the population of the country has continued to increase, you realize that this good intent has escalated into what now looks like a crisis. I would say, from a policy perspective and as a specialist in education, that policy overlaps have also played a part in creating funding gaps in education. For example, when you look at what we have used to fund education, we have various policies financing education, but at different levels. So we have money meant for education going to different areas, and examples are CDF bursaries, they finance education. Then we have the Higher Education Loans Board. Then we have government capitation, scholarships, and then we have also what we may call, there is finances given to various counties. In my opinion, if all these policies were harmonized so that the funding of education is pooled into one pool and students access this money from that one pool, then we would have our students standing at a better pedestal of finding funds whenever they need it.
How has reduced or delayed funding impacted infrastructure, staffing, and student services?
Now, to answer that question, I'll pick up from where I left. Number one, I've said that funding of education has been hampered by inadequacy of funds and increase in population of learners. Taking 2024, for example, the year just passed, and which constitutes the cohort for the 2025 admission. The students who sat KCSE were over 900,000. Those who qualified to go to university were close to 244,000. Now, the remaining 717,000 have had to join other institutions, particularly TVETs, MTCs, teachers training colleges, and other middle-level colleges. What does this mean? All these students going for higher education are expecting to be financed by the Higher Education Loans Board, which you people call HELB. Now, the government does not have sufficient resources to finance all these students. And remember, this is just one cohort. And so now, dividing this money into the 3 levels of education, because we have education, the basic education, then we have technical and vocational education and training, then the State Department for University Education. Now, first, they will give the money for capitation for basic education. That is where you find secondary schools, primary schools. And then after that, they will be financing education at TVETs. Then by the time we reach university education, you find that the budget for Ministry of Education is restrained. And so this leads to delayed capitation to universities, and this complicates management of universities every time. Vice chancellors and councils of various universities have had a difficult time trying to manage universities given the contracted resources. I will call contracted because they have been shrinking over time. And then the disbursement does also not come at the right time. And this means that even basic requirements of managing the institution cannot be met.
All right, thank you so much for taking your time, Dr. Ari. That was very informative. Remember, you can join in on the conversation online using the hashtag #DailyDose and follow us on all our social media platforms using the @Neighbourhood network. Now, in the age of artificial intelligence, the line between fact and fiction is blurring. AI tools are transforming journalism, but also raising serious ethical questions. George Wambua reports on the evolving relationship between technology and truth.
Artificial intelligence is rapidly reshaping journalism in Kenya, transforming how stories are produced, verified, and distributed.
For me, as a journalist who's been practicing for about 15 years now, the emergence of AI is, I would view it as a change. And like any change, it comes with both pros and cons, and proponents and opponents. Whenever there is a change in any environment, there will be some resistance to that change, but there will also be other factions within that environment that embrace that change. And that for me is what AI is. You'll be cognizant of the fact that the ICT sector in Kenya is one of the fastest growing sectors of our economy. ICT is growing at an average of 10% annually. Its contribution to our GDP is quite substantial. So that tells you that there is a lot of activity happening within the space of information communication technologies, and AI happens to be one of the ingredients in that dynamic. So, because of this, then the prevalence of its use within our society generally, but particularly within the practice of information production and distribution, is I think a subject that should be of concern to everyone, and that we should pay attention to in terms of how we address it.
AI tools now assist in data analysis, automated content generation, and even audience engagement. However, the same technology has made it easier to spread misinformation through deepfakes and manipulated content. With no clear legal framework regulating AI use in Kenyan media, experts warn that innovation is outpacing accountability. Dr. Shikali stresses the urgent need for ethical policies, digital training, and newsroom safeguards to ensure technology strengthens and does not compromise truth.
Thank you, George. Indeed, technology continues to redefine the boundaries of journalism and credibility. Dr. Shikali, welcome to studio. How is AI changing the way journalists produce, verify, and share information?
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. That's a good question. And actually, AI is not only transforming journalism, it's transforming actually each and every sector in Kenya. And actually, the challenge has been, how do you adopt it? Now, if you look at what is happening in newsrooms, where you need to do some summaries very fast, we have a lot of stories, you want to summarize it. Then tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Perplexity, for example, can easily be able to do it within a few minutes for you. So in terms of summarizing data in news or facts, AI, spell generative AI, has been greatly used to do that. And then when you have to translate stories, because for you to be able to reach out to the local people, then you may want to actually be able to give your information or your facts in the local languages. So ChatGPT and even other tools are very good at doing that. Although there's still some challenge, especially when it comes to African languages, because of the accuracy. Most of these tools are not very accurate. Even when you look at Swahili, for example, we are not yet there. But still, they can be able to assist, especially when it comes to summarizing information. And then the aspect of transcription. A tool like Whisper is very good at it. So journalists have no option, but if you want to do your work very well and very fast, then you may want to consider these tools for transcription. And then at this particular time, in terms of data science, the media industry is not exceptional here. You may want to do some serious analytics so that you can be able to provide content that is relevant to some particular audience. So when you're creating news, it's important that you analyze so that you're able to appreciate what are your audience up to, and therefore you tailor your news. So AI can be able to support that in a great deal. And then when it comes to aspects of research, we expect that serious journalists should be able to do some deep research before even they give out stories. Now, in this respect, therefore, AI is really a great help here. So it will support that aspect of research and even the aspect of post production in a newsroom. So AI is actually playing a big role as far as journalism is concerned in Kenya.
Deepfakes and fabricated content are becoming more and more common. How serious is this threat?
Yeah, it's very true, very true. Actually, that's sometimes what we call as hallucinations, especially when it comes to generative AI. And the issue of misinformation is something that even human beings can go ahead to do that, especially when they are malicious. But then, especially the generative AI that we have can be able to be used to combat, at the same time amplify the same issues of misinformation. But therefore, it's just about AI responsible use. How do you responsibly use this AI? Like, for example, you appreciate the fact that when it comes to very electrician area time, when people are really trying to get propaganda so that they can compete favorably in quotes, then you find that AI can really amplify such things. But then on the same note, AI can be used to combat the same. For example, you can easily use AI to fact check some of these issues. And things like PESA check or even African check have been used a lot to fact check information and be able to give you what actually you need. And then identifying like what we normally call as deep fakes. You can easily identify that using AI. But then we are saying this can also be negative, that you can still use ChatGPT, for example, to generate a lot of false information and give outside there. So positively, yes, it can be able to help us fact check the information, but then it can also even amplify so that you produce very many fake information. And this is what's actually happening a lot. And this like propaganda. People really use AI to spread propaganda, and people believe. Sometimes you find somebody just fakes a voice, generate a voice, and you think that that's what that person said. And politicians are taking advantage of that. So when it comes to journalism, it is actually necessary that verification. Just about how can you be able to verify this before you go outside there. And we normally say that AI is not moral or immoral. It only mirrors what the person who is using it, his values, it just mirrors the values of that person using it. So in this case, positively, yes, it can be able to help us combat misinformation. But then on the other side, it can really amplify it. So it's just about responsible use. Yes. So thank you for that opportunity, and all the best in whatever you do.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ari. When we return, a troubling trend in Tanzania. Targeted attacks against people with albinism. Stay with us. Continue to send in your thoughts and reactions on our X page at Neighbourhood Network with the hashtag #DailyDose. Now, Kenya's minority groups continue to face discrimination, insecurity, and unequal access to justice despite existing legal protections. Neighbourhood Network's correspondent George Wambua spoke to human rights experts to understand why the system is failing.
Minority communities in Kenya continue to face violence, discrimination, and exclusion despite constitutional protections. At the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, Martin Pepele explains that while legal safeguards exist, enforcement remains weak. Many victims fear reporting violations due to stigma, intimidation, or a lack of faith in the judicial system.
The law is the pillar of any form of protection. We receive complaints. We have an open door policy here where if you feel your rights have been violated, you're free to come and report. Once we report, we follow through forms of investigations. And if we find a person culpable, we have to invoke criminal procedures. The criminal procedures means that you get arrested and be charged in a court of law, and you're found guilty, you be sentenced to an appropriate sentence as per the law. So creating awareness around it, on that provision of the law, has helped many persons in Kenya not to simply break the laws by violating other people's rights, but instead respecting them.
When it was under Uhuru Kenyatta's regime, Uhuru Kenyatta tried as much as possible to protect them. In fact, before he left office, there's a minority group that was given Kenyan citizenship, and now they have Kenyan national identities. But under this government, I've not been able to follow up as much, but I am as much per se, but I can talk about Uhuru's regime. It was there.
He noted that superstition, misinformation, and poverty often amplify vulnerability, especially among visibly different communities. Human rights groups are now calling for stronger legal enforcement, public education, and regional accountability to protect minority groups for targeted abuse.
Up next, we will be speaking to our analyst, Mr. Brian Onyango, to look at it from a human rights perspective. Mr. Onyango, from a human rights perspective, what legal protections exist for minority groups, and where are the biggest gaps?
Thank you. I will begin by first understanding what minority groups mean. In the context of our laws, minority and marginalized groups is a term that has been used to refer to a section of the Kenyan population that have been left behind for reasons that ranges from practice, culture, and even their level of inclusion in development and generally their participation in the discussion about sustainability. That group will include persons with disabilities who have been recognized under the Constitution, particularly specifically at Article 54. There is women, there is also the marginalized groups, and also the youth. Now, these people have been recognized by which law? First, it is the Constitution that recognizes that the country is diverse and comprises various groups of people which it has specified. And the Constitution is the primary law that provides for inclusion of these groups of people through various initiatives such as affirmative action. There is also a law, I think it is a procurement law that provides for access to government procurement opportunities, and that was passed to benefit persons with disabilities, youth, and women when it comes to tenders for government. Again, that is a law that was enacted to try and involve members of these special groups in economic development. There are many other laws. Recently, in May, a law was passed by Parliament, and it was assented to by the President to provide for the rights of persons with disabilities. The Constitution already provides for the rights of persons with disabilities, but the new law, which is the Persons with Disabilities Act of 2025, repealed the previous act that was enacted in 2003. It's called the Persons with Disabilities Act, to entrench these rights and make them more aligned to the Constitution and the and other international instruments that provides for the rights of persons with disabilities. By that, we moved from the foundation of the rights of persons with disabilities as based on the charity model, and now persons with disabilities are viewed as individuals with rights thanks to this law.
How effective has regional cooperation, for example within the AU and the EAC, been in protecting at-risk groups?
I will say, in terms of effectiveness, little can be said in favor of regional cooperation as having contributed to realization of the human rights of marginalized and minority groups. Regional cooperation is mostly hinged on boosting trade relations as a major, that being the major factor for forging regional cooperation. And when there is engagement among countries on the basis of trade, then if there is any benefit to be reaped from that, then that one would become, in terms of human rights, it is mostly indirect. So there would be women, persons with disabilities, or youth who will be engaged in these activities involving different countries. That is not for me to say that the goal was really to specifically benefit them. Them benefiting from these acts of regional cooperation was an indirect consequence of countries interacting on that level. I understand there is various instruments that provide for inclusion of marginalized and minority groups, and recognizes the rights that are specific to them. I really can't say that there has been much effort aimed to ensure that the African Charter on Peoples and Human Rights have been fulfilled. In fact, what we are currently experiencing is a threat on those rights. Recent events in Kenya, Tanzania, and even Uganda points to a big problem in terms of protecting those human rights.
Right, thank you so much for joining us today. Yes, that is definitely a heartbreaking issue there, and one that definitely demands a stronger and regional action. For the last story of the day, Kenya's tree planting campaigns have earned global praise. However, experts say that the impact may be short-lived. Poor maintenance and lack of local involvement continue to threaten long-term forest restoration. Our correspondent, George Wambua, explains why.
Kenya's forest cover continued to shrink despite ambitious tree planting campaigns rolled out across the country. Coffee farmer and exporter Matanda Webuyele explains that biodiversity loss is closely tied to land pressure, climate change, and unsustainable farming practices.
You know, the Kenyan policy for tree planting and cover has been documented. We are supposed to have we are supposed to have 15 billion trees planted by the year 2032. We are supposed to have an increase of 10% forest cover every year increased. But due to business purposes or businessmen who are in need of timber for their own gain of entrepreneurship in timber, making beds, making furniture or roofing, they've been able to cause deforestation. Therefore, we have never met the government targets of afforestation, which is a pity because we are supposed to protect the forests because the forests are the primary source of water.
I think the campaigns are there, there are many, but you don't see any progress, any change. So if these people want us to support their campaigns, I think they should show us the impact they're bringing with the campaigns, yeah.
While millions of seedlings are planted every year, many fail to survive due to poor aftercare and unsuitable ecological conditions. He warns that without long-term planning, soil conservation, and climate-smart agriculture, farmers will continue to suffer declining yields and unstable incomes.
Thank you, George. Clearly, sustainable forest management must go beyond planting trees. It's about ensuring they survive and thrive. Madam Charity, what are the biggest drivers of biodiversity loss and deforestation in Kenya today?
The main contributors to biodiversity loss they include high population. High population has meant the Kenyans to start living and farming in the areas which never used to be farmed, living in areas which never used to be lived. As a result, you lose the biodiversity in those areas. And then this is, of course, the new settlements, the high population has taken us to the new settlements and the new opening new areas for farming. Because when the population is high, you realize even in areas where farming never used to be done, now it is being done. And that is loss of biodiversity. For example, like the irrigation project in Garanakuraru, whatever will be planted there will be monoculture, not the biodiversity which used to be there. So, so the high population has lent to the new settlements and the new farming in new areas. The other thing that has led to loss of biodiversity is fire. Fires are very dangerous. They didn't destroy biodiversity because when there's like a forest fire or even a fire in savannah area, the fires they destroy the flora and fauna and mostly the small things, and that's in biodiversity. So fires are another really source of biodiversity destruction. Of course, there's the issue of logging when an area changes from a forest area to monoculture, no, from the forest area where there was the big trees and the small things, then definitely when we are establishing new plantations in that area at that moment, we have lost biodiversity. So logging also leads to whether commercial or whether legal or illegal, because at that moment when the forest is there, then when it is harvested, before you establish a new forest, you've lost biodiversity. The other thing that causes us to lose biodiversity is the high demand, the just almost like the first one, the high demand of wood and non-wood forest products. Wood and non-wood forest products. Now, this high demand is due again to the high population, and when this high demand, when the demand is higher than the supply, there's depression because you are removing more than what you are rebuilding. So that really affects.
Tree planting campaigns are rising in popularity, but what seems to be missing in the execution?
The issue is that the campaigns have really helped. Let me start by congratulating the campaigns because that awareness alone is very nice, especially with this target of achieving 30% tree cover by 2032. That's a big breakthrough for this nation. And the target there is 15 billion trees. These 15 billion trees will not necessarily be planted. Some you do uh, natural protection. You do protection for natural regeneration. You protect an area and then the trees will grow. So the 15 billion, all of them are not being planted. Some you protect an area and then the trees grow. Now, this is very important because when we rally the population towards that agenda, it creates that awareness in people, and they plant more trees, and even fruit trees, everything. There's generally an increase in tree growing in this nation because, like, when it has rained now, I see people in their boots, the car boots, people are carrying the trees for planting fruit trees, and it's a good thing. This campaign is the only way because if there's no campaign, no action will be taken.
Thank you so much for taking your time, madam. And that is all we have for you today on the Daily Dose. Remember to follow us on all our social media platforms using the @Neighbourhood network shown on your screens down below. Thank you for tuning in. I have been your host, Deborah Chiluti. Till next time, stay blessed.